Good morning. It's Josh here to speak some more blah 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 random philosophy from my mind. Now I realize that to some people the things that I say in my videos, I've heard, people have told me they gain value from some of it and helps them, and likewise their comments help me, and that's why I do this. And some people just think I'm just completely full of shit, and that's fine too. I really don't mind, because I agree with them in the sense that I understand that we as humans try so hard to pretend like we know everything, but the plain fact is we don't. Now I've made a few, I've had a few people say things like, they've sent me private messages asking me, like, how do you do it? How do you deal with this? How do you deal with that? I have issues in my life and it's hard for me to deal with it, as if I'm a counselor, or as if I'm able to, as if I possess some sort of an ability to avoid all these conflicts. And so I just want to make it known that I don't. I am still just a human like everyone else. And by this view of how people interpret my videos sometimes, it really gives me a larger view of how people interpret movie stars or sports players or their bosses at work. In other words, and I'm not comparing myself to any of those, I'm saying you compare yourself to people that have lives that appear a certain way to you, but that you don't know for sure exactly what their detailed inner life is like. Even your coworkers you're exposed to every day at work, but you don't really know their inner workings or what's going on behind closed doors. So what that means, I'm a faulty human. I make all kinds of mistakes, and I've got all kinds of issues to work on, and that's just part of life, There's no real way to avoid these things. So this is what brings us to philosophy, the idea that human life is not perfect and that we have to work on it, and that it takes dedication. Now, I wanted to jump to modern day society. I've been listening to some lectures about like Foucault, who was a French philosopher, and I can't remember the other guy's name. Bamisi, I can't remember. Anyway, they're both just a couple of modern day philosophers who had some pretty interesting ideas about life in general. And this one I was just listening to really kind of got me. They're talking about modern day society and modernity. Now modernity, you hear that word and it sounds fancy, but really it's just the modern day world we live in. Paying the bills, taking the kids to school, making videos. This is modernity. And we look at the past with a romanticism sometimes, as if the history that's been written out for us appears to lay this past out perfectly. And some of us have thought that there was a path that the ancients followed that we are missing. And I at one time thought this as well. And I still believe that it's possible, but there seems to be a conflict of interest among ancient cultures and humanity. Even in times when they were supposedly completely, completely self-sufficient and the society was happy, that was only due to the fact that they had ways to deal with unruly people. And unruly people have always existed. So, in ancient times, up until recent times, in many cultures, if you were caught stealing or raping or doing something you weren't supposed to do, you were drawn and quartered by horses. They'd tie ropes to your arms and legs, and the horses would take off every different direction. You've seen it on the movies. It's true. They used to do this all the time. Some places they still do it. Then they would do things like put sulfur in the wounds and light it on fire. I mean, people were so primal and primitive. It's disgusting. But we think that in modern times we've gotten past that. Modernity has allowed us to get past torture. Of course, we know that our government still tortures prisoners. what does that say to the rest of the world? What does that say to anyone? And prison is where I wanted to go with this. This fellow was laying out a really good example of how prisons and schools are so much alike. And we know this. Many of us who have looked into this know that the same people who build prisons also build schools. And it's a private institution. It's a private company that runs these things, and prison is a privately run institution now. I think most people still think that prisons are just state-run or federal-run, and that everything's fair and hunky-dory and everything's monitored. Well, it's not. I've been to jail. I've never been to prison, but I've been to jail, and it's a horrific place to be. It is disgusting. Even if you're there for something you didn't do, you're sitting in a holding cell with like 20 other people, one toilet in the middle of the room. Now, there's a reason for this. It's not just because the prisons are broke or because the prisons don't, they want to, keep an eye on you. And the toilet in the middle of the room thing. It's breaking you. It's showing you. You're in a holding cell, and this is how you're going to shit. Not only that, but the drinking fountain is usually in the back of the toilet, on the top. Not that it comes from the toilet tank, but the symbolism is there. You come here, you eat our shit, you do what we want you to do. School has the same applications in many forms. But the way the prisons and schools are laid out is to where every person who's there can be watched. Like prison cells are set out to where they can all be watched by one person, the monitor, the guard, but none of the prisoners can hardly even see maybe one other prisoner. These designs are set up to keep people humble, and keep people weak, and keep people from enjoying themselves because they're in prison. But more than that, it's a social control factor. It's a way of putting people in their place. And people, I've heard people talk about how prisoners are let free too much and they're letting too many prisoners go because of budget cuts. The reality is people don't realize how complicated and difficult it really is for a person to get paroled. If you ever watch parole hearings, you'll see that it's very rare that someone actually gets paroled. The whole point of a parole hearing is not to see if the person's ready and fit for society. The point of a parole hearing is to break a person down to the point where they have hope, finally have hope again, and then break them down from that. And the idea of parole is to give people hope so they don't just give in and, go chaos. But the prison industry creates the criminals, is what I'm getting at here. And the criminals are a byproduct of the prison system in a way. Many of them are. I'd say half the people that go there for good reason, and half the people that go there end up staying there just because they don't know any other way. If you're 18 years old and you go break into somebody's house and, accidentally hurt someone, let's say, any kind of weird thing can happen, let's say. It's just something stupid, you were drinking, and you go to prison for 10, 20 years. That's a lifetime. Okay, and people need to realize that not all people who go to prison are bad, but most people who go to prison have a hard time getting away from being bad because they're surrounded by bad people. And not bad people in the sense that they're bad people in general. I don't mean that. I know a lot of good people who've been to prison. I mean that they're forced to take on a certain behavior in order to fit in prison. Now, let's compare prisons to schools. It's the same way. If you look out a place in a school, you'll be stopped and harassed. If you're not in the right place, if you're not doing the walk, as they call it in prison, you have to do the walk the right way, or else you will be pulled aside and you will be reprimanded. And we've set our schools and our prisons up as a control grid. I'm going to continue this in part 2 because I only have 10 minutes of video, but so I'll just end it there.